With this being a Christian prophecy type channel and my believing strongly in both the existence of good and evil and there being something beyond this world into the next, I wanted to share some of what I experienced when my mom was on hospice. For a little background, my mom had a battle with cancer, and we knew that it was something she was fighting, and we believed that we would have longer than we did. Unfortunately, we were wrong. My mom fell and ended up breaking her hip and went through the hip replacement surgery. She did not heal. I would later learn she didn't heal because the cancer had spread to her brain. The very first bizarre thing that happened during this time was when I went to visit her in the hospital after her surgery. The nurse pulled me aside and wanted me to know that my mom didn't quite seem right and I needed to keep an eye on it. She told me that my mom had complained about the elevator all night long. In talking to my mom, she told me she didn't get any sleep the night before because she kept hearing the dinging of the elevator just outside her door. The only problem is there was no elevator outside her door. The elevator was so far away, I really don't think it's possible my mom could have even heard it. Because she was not healing, she was transferred to a long-term rehab center. It was there that she was sent for an MRI, and I found out that her cancer had spread to her brain, and we were told she would have approximately 2 weeks to live. While we were waiting for her to be transferred to the palliative care unit at the hospital, my mom looked at me and said, "The helicopter's coming." And I looked out the window and I didn't see a helicopter, nor did I hear one. My mom told me the helicopter was coming with someone who would need help. About 5 minutes later, the helicopter did come, long before she could have ever seen it or heard it. Mom was transferred to the palliative care unit, wanting to try some treatments she thought might help extend her life. While I was walking to her room that first day, I saw something which really disturbed me. First, actually, I heard something which really disturbed me.
Help me! Help!
Someone was screaming, banging, and beating on something. I walked past one of the rooms that was open, and a woman was holding the cup that contains the water in the hospital room, and she was beating it against the table in the room, screaming, "Help, help me, help me." The nurses would just shut the door, I would soon learn. That was the first of a number of times I would hear that woman, and quite honestly, a few others, screaming, beating the cup on the table. Sometimes they would grab the sheet and be pulling at the sheet or the bed. It was heartbreaking. I couldn't help but notice the difference between some of the people in the different rooms. Some were not screaming for help. They sat in their bed patiently. Some smiled as we walked past the rooms. You could tell those people were at peace. When I got to my mom's room, she told me the night before had been very distressing for her. I think she was beginning to have some of the first experiences she recognized were not of this world. She told me a hole had opened up in the ceiling and she could see above the hospital and into the sky. She was comforted by what she said was a Jamaican nurse who told her, "Don't worry," and he comforted her. I found out later from the nurses there was no Jamaican nurse on duty that night before. I wanted to thank him for helping my mom to feel more comfortable, but apparently my mom saw someone that was not there. She also told me she could hear her grandmother, my great grandmother, whispering the 23rd Psalm in her ear. My great grandmother had died 25 years prior. By this point, I needed to talk to someone about what I was seeing. I did believe that there was an afterlife, and I would say I was a Christian. It's just I didn't have a real strong relationship with God, and it's something that I think we all have to work on. But I was not in the place at that point in my life where I am now. I did not go into the woman's room who was screaming for help. Looking back, maybe I should have. Would it have been successful? I don't know. I wasn't family. I wouldn't have been welcome in her room. I'm not sure what would have happened. I might have done things differently. I started asking questions of the nurses. For the most part, they didn't really want to talk, but a few of them did. One of them told me, "You can't work in a place like this and not believe that there's more beyond this world." After quite a bit of prodding, a few of them began to tell me some of their stories. One of the hospice nurses told me she was with a woman who died, and it was a very peaceful passing. And when she died, she saw her essence leave her body. Those were her words, essence. Another nurse told me a story about her husband getting out of the bathtub and slipping and falling. He hit his head and lost consciousness. She cradled his head in her lap and she was crying and praying, "God, please help him." Later, her husband regained consciousness and he told her he could see himself laying on the bathroom floor and he saw her trying to help him. And there was a tall angel that was there with him. The angel was standing behind her and he looked at the angel and he said, "Help her." And instantly, the angel wrapped itself around the front of her, and the man was back in his body. And that was when he regained consciousness. That was the story she told me. Another story that was shared with me was about a man who was dying. He was in the hospital, and he said there were two angels outside his window, and they just stayed outside the hospital window for more than a day. People were praying for his recovery, and he did recover. He got to go home. It was said he heard one of them say, "It's not his time," and they left. Getting back to my mom and her being on hospice, she would soon be going home with me. Her treatments weren't really working, and unfortunately, that time was coming. But she didn't want to die on that floor. I don't blame her. Who would want to, hearing people screaming for help and beating on things in the other rooms? We brought her home. The social worker gave us a booklet that would tell us my mom would soon be detaching from us, and she did. The booklet said she would begin to see loved ones who had passed on, and she did. She would stare at the blank wall. She began seeing my grandmother. Her dreams were beginning to dream about people who had died. The people began to talk to her, and unfortunately, she began talking less to us, which was also one of the things they told us to expect. She told us she could smell her mother's baby powder. We didn't smell it, but she did. She said she saw people that she didn't know. Some of them were neighbors she had had when she was a little girl. So many people, she said, just there waiting. When asked, Mom said the people were like bronze, full of light. My mom said she saw trees as well, and dogs that she had known that had died before. And I asked her, "Mom, are you saying there are dogs there?" She looked at me like I was a fool, and she said, dogs, look at the souls in their eyes. They have little souls. My mom said she was being told soon, soon. One time, my mom was laying in the hospital bed in our house, and our three dogs were there. They were looking just above the back of the bed where she was laying, and all three of them were barking, and the hair was standing up along their spine. We called the dogs to come into the other room. Two of them did, but this one, Zoe, did not. My mom had been saying there were angels in the room, one of the few things that she would say. I had mentioned this part in a previous podcast, so you may have already heard this story before. But my mom was looking around the room, and although she had been so very sick, she looked beautiful at this point, which is really hard to say because she was dying, but her face was glowing. She was gorgeous compared to what she had been going through. She looked around the room and she had this open-eyed, wondrous look. And she was just moving her head as though she's watching something moving. And I said, "Mom, are there angels here?" And she said, "Yes, they're beautiful." I asked my mom if Zoe was barking at an angel. She nodded her head. Then she looked just behind me, above my shoulder, and I'm about 5'9", so it would have been up pretty tall. And she just smiled and had her mouth wide open. She said, "Angels." I said, "Is there an angel behind me right now?" And she nodded her head and she said, "Yes, they're beautiful." I have to say that was one of the most amazing, beautiful experiences I have ever had in my life, because not only did I feel like something was behind me, it felt like something reached into me from behind, in between my shoulder blades area. It was the most amazing feeling of love and peace and joy. As I said in the podcast, it was like getting a hug from God Himself. One of the things I had said previously was it was like there was a battle for my mom's soul. During this amazing, beautiful experience, I heard a sound that I knew was one of the chickens being killed in the yard. This particular dog had killed the chicken and brought it through the dog door and was leaving it beside the hospital bed where my mom was. I took the dead chicken out into the woods, and while I'm walking into the woods to dispose of it, a black snake slithers across the path in front of me. During that time, I tried playing worship music or the audio Bible. One night, my husband put Billy Graham's The Cross on. I didn't think my mom would even be able to understand or have an awareness it was on, because at that point she appeared to be unconscious. Her eyes were closed. She didn't communicate with us in any way. When Billy Graham got to the part where he prayed with people who wanted to pray, I looked over and my mom's lips were softly moving and she had a tear that rolled down her eye. I knew if she could hear, Billy Graham would be meaningful for her, because she had been raised listening to Billy Graham sermons, as my grandma was a huge Billy Graham fan. One of the nurses told me it's a blessing to see death coming, so you have the ability to talk to family members and tell them what you want to say. I also can't help but think it would give somebody time to repent. But I think of all the people who don't realize their last moment is at the door and they're not ready. I share all this because I believe there is a very real supernatural battle for our souls going on. And we need to try really hard to stay in the Word and be in prayer and seek the Lord because He is real and He loves you very much.